Hello.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to our tabletop interview show here on Fuzka's channel. I'm so happy to see you all. Good evening. I'm Vauglie. Just a quick introduction. I'm Vauglie. I'm usually on the Saturday campaign, difficult terrain, but tonight we are talking about our dear friend and fellow player Maia, sometimes called Maia Papaya, who's the greatest, about her very own tabletop RPG called Ibellan Nights. You guys might have heard about this in our shows and our chats and whatnot. And tonight we're going to talk to Maia a little bit about some of the more detailed, in-depth parts of her TTRPG, which is absolutely fascinating. But let's get started off with an introduction from the bestest Maia on this planet. I promise, it's guaranteed, signature guarantee. I got you right here. Maia, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, first off, I just want to give a shout out of appreciation to the Woody Master in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, I am Maia Everett. I am the creative mind behind Ibellan Nights, a sci-fantasy tabletop RPG. And you've probably seen me around this channel because I'm here like 3 times a week. On the Wednesday campaign, Bygone Keep. On the Friday campaign, Legacy or Kill Team. And on the Saturday campaign, Difficult Terrain, which is where I get the lion's share of my trauma, thanks to Fuzka.
Oh, we're throwing shade out earlier, aren't we?
I love you, girl.
Oh my god. But tonight's gonna be about you, Maia, and I need you to shine right now. I do, because this has been incredible, and not for nothing, guys. I have play tested this stuff with Maia for about a year, actually. From start to finish, creating my character and then doing some amazing play testing where it was just complete madcap, and I loved it. So we're gonna like I said, we're gonna flavor this a little bit differently tonight, especially because from writer to writer, I know Maia, you are kind of a writer in this, but that's actually what I wanted to ask you about tonight. Is sort of like, give us a snapshot of Ibellan Nights first. Like, when a player gets introduced to Ibellan Nights, how are we typically introduced to the world or worlds? So is there like a main home world that we get to know at first? And what would that be? Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah. Everything takes place on Acacia, at least for now.
Oh.
It is a planet in the Calista system, in which used to be part of a empire of ages past. High tech, very corporate run, very evil, profit driven. They stuck their noses where they shouldn't have been, awakened some very terrible things. And in their experimentations to try to unlock faster than light travel, they punched a hole into a reality that really shouldn't have been opened.
What?
Spilled everything. They had to glass a continent on the planet, which kind of spurred a sort of cataclysm of sorts. Players now are kind of sort of reclaiming the surface after pretty much being underground for centuries. They're finally rising up. They build cities. They have societies, civilizations, and they're just trying to get by. A lot of Ibella, the continent that is centered on this portion of the campaign, because there are several other continents, but those are coming later.
Ooh, something to look forward to. Yeah.
It's a very big world. So big that I decided to split it by continents, because otherwise it would be just too much. It would be brain meltingly large. But yeah, so but
So
I'm
those are like
sorry.
expansions and things like that. And, thank you, Nenners. Glass for the non-sci-fi cats. Melting the surface of a carbon-based planet with orbital fire.
Yeah, thank you, Nitters.
Thank you, Nenners, for the physics lesson. I appreciate that. So they're on one main continent, sort of one main world right now, World Acacia, and the continent is Ibella, for which your campaign is named. So that's one of the key locations. So, or key continents. So, what are some locations on that continent that are going to be where the players kind of start out, like the Bunny Hill, I guess?
Yeah,
Can we call it that?
a huge portion of character creation really affects what each adventure campaign will look like. Is pretty much where you're starting. So, Meridia would be your sort of solar punk, somewhat utopian region. They have the premier freelancer organization that goes around and tries to clear out ancient ruins, take care of the planet, greenify things. They're very optimistic over there. It's kind of like a almost Star Trek vibe.
Yeah, I remember you saying. So the solar punk, the kind of utopia-esque, like we're always trying to be better kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
But then part of the reason they aren't exactly perfect is because there are some notes of a surveillance state, because there's some leftovers. They used to be a puppet state of their neighboring Hadari, which is a very intense corporatocracy, where they claim they're a meritocracy, but in reality, it's cyberpunk dystopia.
Okay.
You have these massive cities, crazy looking skylines, but there's just all sorts of madness going on in the streets, syndicates and corporations pretty much testing products on the populace through the syndicates, and it's pretty nasty. But at the same time, a campaign over there would be less about exploring and oftentimes more about surviving in the streets.
Yeah.
Pulling off heists, taking out.
That's cool. So it's almost like a corporate mob situation, I guess, in a way, but like among all of these other different aspects. Like as soon as you started talking about fighting in the streets, I thought about, some like kids maybe called like street urchins, usually in like D&D or something like that. But in this kind of setting, that it's completely different, right? I mean, obviously it's more sci-fi.
Yeah, I mean, on a low level, you're probably dealing with like street gangs, and corrupt police officers, things like that.
Okay.
And obviously, the syndicates that kind of mess with everything.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like they have their hands in everything. They're just controlling everything. They're very nefarious, I'm sure.
Yeah, you probably wind up doing a lot of mercenary work to make ends meet, and folks over there are generally way more cautious.
Okay.
You don't exactly have a UBI over there, Universal Basic Income, to like.
Yeah.
Medical, you get shot. You can only call in so many favors before, you're flat broke.
Okay, so Meridia, Hadari. What are some other locations?
Rose Boulevard. Kind of a almost post-apocalyptic wasteland. They've gotten better. They basically, it's a bunch of people who didn't want to live in either Hadari or Meridia, sort of went and formed their own spot on the borders of the scraplands, and they took over the ruins of a supermax prison and are pretty much converting it into a city. And over the years, they've kind of got these sort of hydro farms there, due to help with Meridia. And so they have a thriving food culture, but at the same time, they do live bordering scraplands, which is one of the most regions. And, they haven't entirely taken over that max prison. There's still a lot of dangers inherent in there, like defunct drones, and security measures. They also have like a lot of mutants on the other side that try to raid.
Mutants?
Not to mention other raiders that come in there. Indeed, the scraplands are pretty much an irradiated wasteland.
Okay. So the say the name again. The Rust at Boulevard.
Rust Boulevard. Yeah.
Rust Boulevard. Okay, and then Rust Boulevard has scrap lenders. Is that from like the Steel Carnival? Is that what those guys are?
They're survivalist.
Okay.
Over in Rust Boulevard, a lot of people interchange that with Scraplanders because.
Okay.
When it comes to the Steel Carnival, that is a different story. Instead of taking over
Okay.
Supermax prison, they actually took over the ruins of a sort of Disneyland resort town.
Whoa! Oh yeah, I remember you mentioning that.
Indeed, yeah. So over there, it's very anarchic, post-apocalyptic.
Ooh.
Mad Max, but lesser. It's like really, really ridiculous and funny.
Okay, so it's like dark comedy kind of very.
Yeah, they're a little wild over there. All
right.
about freedom and anarchy and just having a good time. You'll find your golden-hearted Robin Hood types that are still troublemakers, and never underestimate that. But
yeah,
there's also the types that just are into like violence and just being insane with it.
Okay. So, and is that it? Are there a couple of other places?
Oh, there's absolutely more.
I mean, okay. So, I sort of want to hear more of a list, but I'm also really curious in these locations. Like, so do you want to mention like maybe a couple more locations, and then we can like delve into some of the NPCs that a player and the GM may act or encounter, not respectively?
Yeah, so a couple of more reasons. There's Olympia, which is more of a superhero-based thing. As I mentioned, there's a lot of experimentation on the populace in Hadari.
Okay.
And so some of the individuals over there started developing mutations, superpowers, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of them have migrated over to Olympia, who, like Meridia, is trying to escape that sort of corporate yoke. And so over there, it's very superheroes, villains, rogues, vigilantes. You've got Graffiti Palace, which is basically the best way I can sum it up is if Jet Set Radio took over Buckingham Palace. So graffiti, a lot of skating, music, just out there having fun. But they also have a sort of loosely night themed system they go on. A lot of the way they get around is by grinding on the rails there with special boots. Very, very punk and fun. Heading into other regions, you would have Serenia, or rather the Syrian region, where basically it got real cold because there is now a ring on the planet. And this is high on the mountains. The city collapsed in on itself, and the people underground have taken over the ruins of that city. And they have a very unique underground, almost. It's a very strange world down there. Obviously, you have your bioluminescent flora and fauna. There's a lot of monsters and species and things you wouldn't normally encounter on the surface.
Is everyone a teenager with bad hair, as Foos asks? Is Foos trolling? Is this a thing? Like what?
Yes. And then you have I'm leaving one out. Yes, the Laurel Enclave, which is in basically a man-eating forest. Very dangerous region that will test anybody that tries to get in there. If they're found wanting, the forest will either try to remove them by reshaping itself and sending predators in to chase them off, or consume them, and they'll just be a part of the land. They're fertilizer at that point.
Okay, so bouncing off of that, Ninners is asking to talk about the shrooms, except he's yelling at you to talk about the shrooms. I'm trying to do it in like a more polite way because that's my level of professionalism. So
we've seen you on Saturdays, Vauglie.
I know. I'm just saying. Listen. But do you want to? We'll talk a little bit about the shrooms in just a minute. So what are so other than after the Laurel Enclave, what are some other locations and whatnot that you want to talk about?
literally just named like 10.
You just did 10. All right. So maybe we'll pause here for just a second. And build off of that, because there's bound to be amazing, like unique characters that come out of these different locations, right? So let's talk a little bit about some of the NPCs, because I remember when we were role playing, there were a couple of people that you had that may or may not, and correct me if I'm wrong, may or may not be included in canon and whatnot. Can you talk about some of those players in some of those locations? Like, which ones are your favorite in these locations?
For the Steel Carnival, there is somebody who works at Metal Hands Refurbishing. He's a tech junkie, inventive individual who's very much what you would expect for somebody that lives in the Steel Carnival. As in he's a little bit mad, very flirtatious and strange. He's almost like a cyberpunk Jack Sparrow. He's a very unique individual.
Wow.
And the stuff that's offered in his shop is very outrageous, but at the same time can be very practical. He was one of my favorite because he's always some level of weird.
Yes, let the weird live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So there's him. I basically have NPCs for every region, and that is something I'm continuously building.
Right.
There's a few mafiosos over in Hadari that are very interesting characters. There's interesting relationship between the various like syndicates that are there. Some of them try to have like some kind of street honor, street code going.
Okay.
Where others are just all about like wilding out.
Okay.
There's a club over there called Alibi. I'll let you guess why.
Oh my god, that is brilliant! Yes.
Yeah, it's a super
that works
club,
so
and
well.
there's a lot of like craziness that goes on over there. There's a few folk that are my Mycenaean, that are NPCs that I was going to run at some point. A grandpa,
Yeah,
and a granddaughter who's a bit menacing and connected to some of the syndicates there.
ooh. So the Mycenaeans are the mushroom people, right?
Yeah,
My people. They're my people.
indeed.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
But yeah, I pretty much have NPCs in every region. There's a lot of like vibrant personalities, and a lot of the time, when I'm running these playtests, that's when the NPCs are kind of made, because I'm kind of responding to the region and the players in it. I mean, I make them outside of that, but
Right.
that switches my priority onto them. But yeah, the idea is to have those notable figures for every region.
Okay.
Quite a few of them have them already, but that's still something I'm working on actively.
Yeah, I can imagine. I remember you doing that while we were play testing. And I do remember you being kind of proud, especially of the Mycenaeans. I thought you designed them very well, and I am biased.
Thank you.
Because my character was very much going to play with them. So, are there any in particular that you like just really enjoyed creating that you feel comfortable telling us about? I'm actually really curious about that.
I literally just mentioned one.
Just those. Okay, just those. I don't know if you want to like talk about more. That was an opportunity to talk about more.
It's all good. Let me see here, because I've made so many at this point that names kind of elude me sometimes.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I do have a pair of syndicate twins, who are one of the more villainous syndicates, who are pretty much pop stars. To put it short,
what?
They got the boyish looks, the R&B groove going on, super famous.
Oh my god!
But at the same time, they just don't want to leave the streets. They're always getting involved in craziness, and they have some real seedy connections.
Oh, I love that.
And their father that's always perpetually disappointed in them. Yes, they do R&B hands in the rain.
In the rain, wearing very shiny clothes.
There's a hero named Doom Train.
Doom Train?
Whose
Oh
sort
my
of
God.
signature is he'll like blast his theme song, and then villains will get like a spotlight shine on them, and basically that's him running in with a great sword, charging in super fast, and pretty much running them over.
Oh yeah.
He's a corporate superhero
Ah,
who,
corporate superhero.
on some level, was an idealist coming up,
Okay.
and was actually in the bottom of the runnings because there's a lot of after the whole Olympia thing, when that city was formulated, Hadari realized there's good business in marketability in heroes. So they've have a lot of like pop-ups where they look for viable candidates, train them, put them through tests and everything. And he was pretty much at the bottom.
Yeah.
However, when it came time to finally go through that round of empowerment, the mutagens and the cybernetic upgrades and everything, he took to them and bulked up super big, and just hulked out. And he's currently somebody who tries to juggle that sort of corporate superhero things where a lot of what's going on is fabricated for publicity. But at the same time, he also tries to do stuff at the street level to help out in local neighborhoods, especially the one he's from.
Oh.
And he does try to mentor younger heroes.
I already love this guy.
He's in that delicate line.
Okay.
So that's from Hadari. I already told you about them.
Yep.
I have so many.
You could go on. Okay, so let's go back to one of the things that I mentioned kind of at the beginning, from writer to writer. The writer in me was always just hype to hear about like your ideas for the world, and you breathe so much life into these spaces for us when we were playing, in addition to like all of that lore that you wrote. So I want to like pit stop for a little bit after talking about all of these things you could potentially do to build your own character, and hear about the creative process that you go through trying to create these characters or the locations within the world. So how did you form Ibellan Nights initially? I know you talked a little bit about that in the previous interview, but I also kind of want to hear about your creative process in how you're building it. Like, did you have anything to inspire you, like prompts, or did you sit down and write it out all in one shot, or was this over time? How did you go about doing that?
Well, been a gamer since childhood, role players since the age of 21. So I am 41 now. So that is a lot of time of a lot of ideas and a lot of inspiration. I was always a writer, even when I was a little kid. But over time, over the years, through all my gaming experiences, watching all these interesting shows, watching these movies, like just basically indulging in seeing the creative world around me, I got inspired by countless things. And all those inspirations sort of reached a critical mass, I want to say around like 2015-ish.
Okay.
Where it was getting to the point where I was just like dreaming up so many things, thinking of so many things. I was just like, I have to get this out on paper because I literally cannot sleep.
So they were like stuck in there, like bubbling around?
Yeah, pretty much.
Whoa.
Be imagining stuff all night instead of sleeping, which sucked because I worked a lot.
Fair point. Yeah, that's not like a great combo, right? But that's fascinating. There are actually some writers that talk about that they have to get something out of them. They almost have to, outsource that information and whatnot. So that's fascinating. So they bubbled up. You couldn't sleep. You had to get it out. It's almost like this spirit that you formed inside of yourself and put on paper. At least that's what it kind of sounded like.
Yeah, once I started typing all that stuff, and then I looked over and I was just like, oh, some of this is actually kind of cool. And then I started to run it by other people I was writing with at the time because I was big in the role-playing communities. And a lot of people were intrigued by it. And so we, did a few test runs of it. Just the setting itself, I didn't have rules. I didn't have mechanics or anything like that. It was just a bunch of like loose ideas. And every time that we did a scenario within that, I was like, oh, I can refine this. This can be better. I could do this. I could do this.
True.
Oh, this gives me a new idea. I could add this. And so every time I play tested it, it just got better. And mind you, I was still doing this as a hobby. I was a social worker at the time.
Whoa. So you were doing, like, this is a full-time job, though.
I was having fun. It was a hobby. So it wasn't until the pandemic hit, and, you know, the world pretty much turned over upside down, that a friend of mine, I don't know if they're in the chat, but if they are, Iris, thank you, looked over some of the stuff I had written and was just like, hey, you should make this a thing, like a professional thing. It looks very professional. I was like, oh, really? Okay. And that little earworm got me more serious and more focused on everything. And so instead of just having this loose amalgamation of a bunch of ideas, I was just like, all right, maybe it is time to get real serious with it, and then come up with some solidified mechanics. And big shout out to Foos Knitters, all of you that I D&D with, because my tabletop experiences with you helped me refine a lot of the mechanics of that setting, just by like looking at other settings and being like, oh yeah, that's something that could be improved, or that's something that could be made faster, or this gives me an idea to implement this, etc., etc. How could I smooth this out?
Yeah.
And there was a time in which I was shopping around for different mechanics, but none of them I felt really like did a good job of communicating what this world is and letting players like nurse. Yeah, the Foos trauma has made me a better writer.
Yes, trauma trained makes everybody better.
That is true. Foos has never stunned me for life. And
wait, what did Nenners do?
He stunned me for almost an entire day in combat.
Nenners!
And that reinforces my belief that in Ibellan Nights, it's real hard to stun somebody to that degree.
Really? Okay. All right. So we made sure that doesn't happen as a player mechanic.
Yeah. Have you seen stars for a whole session? It's crazy.
Oh.
But yeah, I was just refining the mechanics and also play testing. Every time we did a play test, I would come out of that with a crap ton of ideas on how to refine things. And every setting we did it in, that setting itself would grow. It would become a better version. For example, when we did a recent play test in Steel Carnival, I came out of that like, because it used to be just the ruins of like a circus or something,
right?
That they took over, and I was like, nah, what if I turn this into like the ruins of Disneyland, so it could have way more functionality and residential areas and things like that built in, transportation system and stuff like that. Yeah, so every time I do a play test, the setting gets infinitely better. Well, infinite's a strong word, but vastly better. And that goes for both the mechanics and the lore. Also, I do have a tendency to like shop around and check out various different media, not to pilfer ideas, but just to be inspired by them, because there are some times when I go into the creative funk, and I'm just like, man, I'm not feeling anything. And then by like trying out different various medias, like for example, I'm currently playing a bit of Final Fantasy 14.
Ooh.
And while playing that, I realized, yo, I haven't really done a whole lot with the monsters in my set. I should probably do more of that.
There you go. Everybody draws inspiration from everywhere. I mean, it's not like a copyright thing at all. Like, there's no way, unless you live in a cave on somebody's property somewhere where nobody's going to bother you, there's no way you're going to not be influenced by something.
Yeah. But it got me thinking about like, hey, there's a weakness here. I don't have a whole lot of monsters or monster lore, so I need to start getting better about that. I'm
excited.
Yeah.
There's some really cool monsters. I remember us fighting a lot, and you talked a little bit about that before. But I'm actually, so in talking about this, especially because you're essentially editing, right? Editing, upgrading, improving, moving forward. So what were some of the challenges that you had with writing and creating this world when you were just starting out and up until now? What are some of the challenges that you had?
When I was just starting, it was a hobby, so I didn't have any challenges.
Okay.
It was just me having fun. Like literally, I was just doing stuff I wanted to do. It wasn't like, oh no, I have to get this done. There's a deadline. No, it was just like, oh, I have ideas. I'm gonna write them down. That's great. I like this idea. I'm gonna make it better.
So you had an easy time of it.
There's no challenge involved.
All right.
Currently, once I started getting more serious about it, obviously coming up with mechanics for a big old world that has a lot of unique lore in it is a huge challenge. As is learning how to better organize it, I'm always looking at it to make it more accessible. Always improve the language and organization of the documents that contain all of this information. And then I always have to like prioritize, like, all right, what's important and what can be like in a supplement or something, or like another download, like, because a lot of these things used to be way more massive than they are, and I'm just like, all right, I don't want to drown the players in information. So
yeah, exactly. And that was one of the things that for me, because I'm such a noob, like I only got into this like a few years ago, most of the gaming and things like that. So one of the things that you really showed me when we were playing is, what stuff I had to focus on as a newbie to try and get through some of the mechanics and whatnot. And that was actually really helpful, all those adjustments that you made. And I appreciate that very much.
Well, first off, shout out to Kit. MVPs of like the play testing and like getting everything up the ground with the setting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love getting feedback. I am not an arrogant creator. Because I'm always looking for ways to improve things. I am kind of a perfectionist, so whenever somebody's able to point out something that could be improved, I'm just like, great. I'll get to work on it. There may be times where I'll get some critique and then I'll be reluctant about it for like a day. And then give me a day to think about it, and I'll be like, oh no, wait, that makes sense. I should probably, I can fix that. That could be better.
Right. I mean, I don't blame you. I think most writers, probably fight their editors, right? And whatnot, whenever but you are your own editor, and fortunately you have players who want to support you. So it's kind of a different dynamic here, right?
Yeah, thank you. And again, I do love making improvements. I love tweaking. I love making things better. So usually when I get advice or, when somebody's like, hey, could you do this or add this, or I'm usually all aboard for it. Unless it is something that thematically doesn't fit the setting. And it's not something I'm willing to like shoehorn in.
Yeah.
That there are some times where I'm just like, yeah, that's a great idea, but not for here. But most of the time, I think a lot of the ideas, and especially when it comes to restructuring materials, that I love to get advice on.
All right, there you go. So, and then this is another question that I kind of had that I've been wondering about. So in all of the things that you wrote down, well, first of all, how did you get all of Ibellan Nights out of your head and onto paper? Was it in a story format? Was it in an outline format? Or was it just like summary, like describing the place?
I literally just like opened a notepad one day and just started typing stuff. And then the week after, I looked at the notepad and was like, oh, I should probably move this into a Word document because there's a lot of stuff in here. And then I did. And then I looked over that and I was like, oh, I could probably tidy this up a bit. And then started.
Okay.
When I say there was no complication in this process, there was not. There was just I have ideas. I put the ideas on the paper. I look at the ideas. I can make these ideas even cooler. I'm going to do that.
Okay, so I'm assuming just like summary and just paragraphs of stuff, just things like that. It's almost like an outline.
It wasn't until I decided to like make this a serious venture that I began to like really organize things. I mean, it was vaguely organized before, but if you were to look at something before I decided to make this into like a fully fledged tabletop setting versus now, it's slightly cringe and how it's organized.
Okay. So
oh God, why did you do that? Oh, that's awful.
But that flip over. So what were some of the challenges that you had, or what were some of the things that you learned from adapting that sort of free form kind of like paragraphs of ideas into a TTRPG format?
It was something I learned from that.
Yeah, like I can only imagine what, or maybe not even imagine what it would be like to carry that over to TTRPG. Like, how did you transform it into this game?
At its core, this has always been an RPG. It has
Oh,
always been a role-playing game. So the transition over to tabletop didn't really affect me very heavily when it came to the lore.
okay.
That was easy. That was super easy. I was just restructuring and reorganizing it so people could have an easier time reading it.
Mm.
The mechanics, obviously, like creating some brand new mechanics for a system and a world, that was where the challenge came in. And again, a lot of that was informed by like my experiences on tabletop with the Fusca channel.
Yeah.
But also I took a look at a lot of other tabletop settings. It was just like, all right, what are they doing right? What could be improved on? What's a labyrinthine mess that I will never do? Like I always like try to check out what's going on everywhere else because
Mhm.
I don't think I'm perfect. So I'm just like, the thing I'm doing could probably be done better, or I could look to others for inspiration, or try to bring a unique flair to it. And at the same time, I always have to make the mechanics tailored to express what is happening in the setting. So
Yes.
yeah,
They have to be parallel at the very least, or blend together.
yeah,
They have to make sense with each other. Kind of
there are a lot of things that are better as amorphous ideas, but when I tried to turn them into mechanics, they became overly complicated. So there are a lot of things that I streamlined and simplified. Some mechanics were purely stripped out. Others were folded. Some were just given better language to clarify what it is they do. And you know, it's challenges of balance, really.
Yeah.
The mechanics inspire elements of the story, or was it the other way around?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask.
Both. Obviously, the story came first. So, hello, Thunderstorm. Yeah, so I was writing all this stuff, and the things that I was writing inspired ideas for things I wanted to implement. And then when it started to become more mechanical, I went into those mechanics and I looked at them and I would just be like, yeah, but does this really work? And you know, in creating mechanics, that means I'm also creating equipment, weapons, accessories, things like that.
Yeah.
And then when I created those things, I was like, I should probably make lore for all of this stuff that people use. And so that's how it kind of turned into a feedback loop. It just looped around. It was like, I've created an item. This item should probably have a story about how it works and its functionality.
Okay.
So here I am writing lore again. And now I make a new item, so I got to write lore for that too. So yeah,
a never-ending cycle of lore. So what about this process surprised you? I'm curious to hear. Were there any surprises that came along with these?
No.
All right.
Surprises that came with turning everything into. I guess how complicated it could get at times. There are a lot of times where I'm looking at the system, the mechanics, and I'm just like, I have found a thing that needs to be fixed or improved or tweaked. And then I'll look at it and be like, but if I tweak this one thing, I'm gonna have to tweak everything. And then there's just this, oh no.
Yeah.
And it takes me like a minute to just kind of pull myself together and be like, well, I got to start. Even though I know that once I start, that's it for like the next 2 weeks of my life. It's just going and fixing the ripples.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that very much. So, and talking about the mechanics and how much you built in and layered in, some of the other things that you have done that I loved with the Ibellan Knights was the ability to customize our characters with these very cool weapons, with these very cool settings. It was awesome. So it suited almost anything we wanted. Like, so for me, you helped me build this crazy crazy ass witch lady that just like popped out of a bush and hated technology and just wanted to like cook food, live by herself, and maybe keep some pigeons while growing some food and whatnot. That's highly specific. That's incredible. So fortunately, we had you as a guide, taking us through this process and whatnot. And that was actually one of my favorite things as part of your campaign. So, how in your handbook and whatnot, how have you let players know that the sky is practically the limit? Like, there's no rigorous kind of box that you had to fit yourself in, like what I kind of felt like with D&D. So how do you kind of let players know that this is their world, they can customize it?
Well, since aren't too many people aware of Ibellan Nights, it's usually me just telling them that. But in many cases, what I do is eventually I realized, I can't physically be there to walk everybody through. So what I try to do is structure the player mechanics and the lore in such a way that you can read it from start to finish and build a character along the way. And the opening of every subsection is just like, this is another part of the character creation process. You make some decisions here and then write them down on the character builder that I supplied alongside it that coincides with it. Because a lot of times when I would like go through other settings, I'm not trying to name names, but when I would go through the PDFs and be like, how do I build a character? And then it would be like, all right, start your thing on page 15, go here to look at races, and then go to page 128. And then that's where you can figure out about the classes, and then backtrack back to page 32 so you can learn about backgrounds, and then go back to 216 so you can pick out your. This is like,
ew.
Why are we jumping all over the place? Just let us do it from A to B to C to So I try to structure the materials so that you can just kind of read through them, and the lore itself. Like if you go through that, you might get some idea sparks from that. Just like about the various regions, the factions and everything. Like, oh, this region sounds cool. That's part of the character creation process. You found a region you like, that's part of it. And then you read some more, you're like, oh, this faction's cool. That's another part of it you've nailed. And so just knowing where your character's from and who they're affiliated with, already you've done some character building. You might not realize it. And then when you finally get to the mechanics, you'll be like, oh, this section. Well, I already picked these two things, so they're in there. And, a lot of the times during the character creation process, people will ask me questions like, hey, so I have this concept and I have this cool idea about a character that blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's great. You can do that. And you're like, what?
Yeah. For example, because look in the chat, Nender says, hey, girl, I would like to have a party of 5 combat engineers who, through the campaign, essentially build a control Voltron. Can you do that?
Yes. I mean, you probably won't be going on space age adventures because of the way the planet works, but certainly build a mech. In fact, for GMs especially, there are templates and mechanics there for building all sorts of monsters, bosses, and things like that. And more importantly, if you want to have a boss that has like multiple parts, like say a mech with several guns, flamethrower, legs, and all this stuff, you can literally build a multi-part boss in that setting. As for kaijus, I mean, probably I assume if they're big, they're probably going to have a lot of parts. So you could build a multi-part boss and have it be a kaiju. Although I imagine that would not be stomped by 4 adventurers or mercenaries or whatever. I probably need a whole crew, and I don't want to be that GM that runs that scenario.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like a kaiju would be the size of a building. Like the building would be the mech that just comes to life at one point and just destroys everything.
In the lore, however, yes, kaijus are a thing.
What?
Yes. And in fact, sometimes when you're trying to stop monsters, the campaign that you play tested, we were trying to stop all those corrupted things from forming an amalgam. If you let too many of them get together, they will turn into a kaiju. It's just a chaotic mass of writhing flesh that is towering as high as a building. So
Oh, ew. Oh my god.
why
So apparently,
out there.
Foos has named them My Juice. I don't know what
That
that
is, yeah,
means.
no,
I
that's
don't know
terrible.
if it's like if in another language that means something else.
Yeah,
So
foods is bad.
listen, I'm just here asking the questions. And apparently, is this true? Is our boy Kit making a character creation system? Is he trying to
Yes,
do that? Oh,
yes, he's
what?
been working on that for a long, long time.
Is this outside of the Excel spreadsheet I remember?
No, he's graduated from that. He's using another platform to create that. See, the issue, and I'm sorry, Kit, is that I update, and when I do updates, they're usually very big, and they change a lot of mechanics. So, uh, so I'm just like, I'm sorry, I got to do this to you, but I know you're working on the character creator. However, it is different in some ways now. So,
Oh no.
sorry.
That's awesome though. See, you have an amazing this community is awesome. Like no matter where you slice it, like I love the people that have come together to play this and like support you. It's just been absolutely fantastic. And thank you also for answering my next couple of questions. Like for example, how do you want to do your RPG differently in the sense that you want players to have creative freedom? You talked about your character creation system, and you sort of recommended about how players should go through the system. Do you want to speak to that a little more?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, it's generally a good idea to kind of look through the lore. I'm not even saying you have to read the whole book because it's pretty big, but there are nifty quotes ahead of everything.
Nifty quotes.
Most everything. Yeah. That kind of sums up a lot of things. So, like, for example, if you're looking through the origins or lineages, heritages, races, depending on what setting you're talking about, each one of those origins has a little quote before it that kind of gives you a glimpse into what they are. So, a lot of times I'll just recommend people like, hey, if you don't have a whole lot of time, just look at the quotes before everything, every faction, location, and everything. And when something piques your interest, just check that part out.
Ooh.
And go on and see the other quotes. You're still kind of learning about the other things there, but you don't have to do deep dives in every single bit.
Okay.
And again, going through that, you'll probably have some character ideas immediately. And then by the time you get over to the mechanics, again, some of those choices are probably already made. So you're going through the process, and then you're just deciding things you want your character to be talented at, good at. There's literally 20 skills.
Whoa.
And some of them are crafting focused.
Yeah.
Actually, no, that's incorrect. I'm bad at math.
20?
This is my bad at math face. There's
Okay.
24 skills.
24, okay.
Physical, technical, social, and then crafting. And every character can select a variety of those. Just kind of build what they are. It is impossible for a character to be good at every skill. That would be ridiculous. Also, it's meant to be a game where you kind of work with your teammates to accomplish things.
Right.
You're trying to solo this. Good luck.
Yeah. I love that about your characters. Like you can't just be one set of characters. You need to like really have a variety when you go in, because God forbid you're missing any one of some of those elements, you're gonna be screwed.
Well, it's also unique in that, like, if everybody wanted to just like to use MMO terminology, be a ridiculous DPS, you could do that. You could go in and just spike everything to death. Obviously, it's a very high risk way to handle things.
Yeah.
You might want to bring a lot of items that could kind of shore up the lack of like defensive abilities and healing and things like that. But it's possible. I wanted to have that sort of freedom because one of my biggest inspirations was the MMO known as City of Heroes. And there you can kind of go in and like literally build anything. There were archetypes and things like that, but within those archetypes, there are always like a plethora of choices. And yeah, like for example, if you wanted to be support, you could just be a pure healer, or you could throw force fields over people, or you could like buff damage like crazy. You could siphon enemy speed and make your own team faster and things like that. We
have two questions on here that I kind of want to get to add on to what you were saying. So
you can download the big booty books over at Ibellan.
Yeah, so the question was, where can we download the Big Booty books? And I need somebody to put in that chat that, oh, thank you. Appreciate the Big Booty books. I also recommend, if you're not on Patreon now, you need to be on Patreon, number one. Question number two, from Nenners. Given your seething hatred for teleportation, what will be your approach to vehicles and the inevitable vehicle combat?
I don't hate teleportation. I have mixed feelings about it because I know the moment it's introduced, a lot of things get thrown in for a loop. There may be in the future methods of short range teleportation, but I would never make it like, you're teleporting to the other side of the planet. No.
Yeah.
Because that would just invalidate a lot of things.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when you introduce mechanics like teleportation, the world suddenly gets a lot smaller.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to be anywhere else. You just go from point A to point B. You're there instantly, and then problem solved. And this is supposed to be a setting that emphasizes a lot of exploration. However, that being said, if you're like in a lot of the cities, city states, it's a futuristic setting. There's going to be a lot of transportation methods, trains, cars, flight. Granted, flight is somewhat limited in this world because of the chaos in the atmosphere, but you can still do it. There's a lot of ways to get around. And oftentimes when you're in a mission, you're being dropped off at a point where transportation doesn't necessarily reach very well.
Yeah.
You have issues with communication and things like that. And you're kind of dealing with that, at least as a freelancer or a scraplander or something like that. God, where was I going with that?
That's okay. We can pause for a little bit in the last few minutes, because if you can believe it, it's almost been an hour. So, yes, Ninners, drive-by trains.
Yes, thank you, Ninners. It's about vehicles. So there's a lot of vehicles in this setting, and I definitely want to have. There is literally a driving skill, which means part of the setting will be driving. And so the driving skill can be used to like repair vehicles, hotwire them, maybe steal them. And obviously when you're driving the vehicle, you'll be relying on that to like not crash. When we did the Shiitake solution playtest, it was before the driving skill was introduced, but you were driving that mushroom raft that you made.
Mushroom raft. I say that 5 times fast. I love that thing.
That little bit of innovation from you all that was entirely unexpected turned into a mechanic later on. This is what I mean by like when we do stuff, I take that and I'm like, oh, I should probably introduce that. That was a cool thing. I should make that official. Yeah, when it comes to vehicles, there's 2 variants in most cases. There's obviously ground-based travel, wheels, and then there's hovering, which usually doesn't go that high. It really depends on the vehicle you're in.
Okay.
But usually ground-based travel relies on either solar energy, fuel, etc., maglev if you're on trains and things like that, or especially when you're out of the cities, because usually solar, electric, you can charge your car up, you'll be fine. Once you're out in the wilderness, you're depending on liquid fuel, because that,
like hydropower?
Usually eco-friendly fuels.
Okay.
But yeah, and while you're out there in the wild, you obviously have a lot of threats you have to deal with, like literal packs of raptors and like raiders and things like that.
Oh yeah, the raptors
running all over the grasslands and plains and things. Also, people want to steal your stuff. So, raiders.
Raiders are great.
Don't bring your tricked out Lambo into the grasslands.
No, I doubt that the Lambo would be able to handle that, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Unless it's a super futuristic Lambo.
Right? Or like the wheels. I don't know. We'll ask Nanners later. So speaking of being creative about this stuff, so we've been talking about creativity the entire time. So let's talk a little bit about some of the, if you're comfortable with this, some of the creative solutions players have used to get themselves either in or out of these particular situations during playtesting. and what did you learn from them?
Well, I just mentioned one.
You did?
Yes. So the way the skill system is built is that it encourages creative solutions. So, for example, when your character first arrived in the forest that they went into, the Midlands, and they started looking for mushrooms and things like that they could use to cook, you were relying on naturalism. That's skills, creative. I didn't tell you to do that. You just did it.
Yeah.
And that's great.
True.
When, I thought that when we got to the rivers, the streams and things like that, you folks were just going to look at that and then pull on your geophysics skills to create a sort of like ice raft or something that you use to sail. Instead, you cut off the cap of a giant mushroom and sailed on that. And I was unprepared for that. But at the same time, I applaud it.
I think we did use a little bit of that stuff because I vaguely remember having to freeze the mushroom or something like that at some point.
We did, yes.
Yeah.
And then you used it as a raft and fought off jumping piranha fish who ejected spines and electrified things. So
right, exactly.
Turned them into sushi, which you later ate. I don't.
Yeah, and
any of that was expected.
I think the other part of it was I think you also had me like driving the mushroom at one point just with water because I think my character was focusing on the primal core.
You were sailing it with your control over the elements, yes.
Yeah. So
and then there's this correct in another playtest, it had a sentient advertising coffee machine strapped to his neck.
Oh my god.
That character is a trouble magnet. That was a campaign in the Steel Carnival, and it was every bit as mad as one might expect.
Oh my god! Actually, I need to see this now.
I was expected for.
Yeah, that sounds very unexpected. But okay, all right. So, what was another kind of really tough situation? I just want to hear another like maybe bad situation that we got either our playtest or another playtest you've had that we got ourselves out of.
Like every fight.
I mean, was it though? So it wasn't really a run-of-the-mill fight every single time.
You literally got sniped during the first combat.
I barely remember that. I apologize.
Yeah, a lot of the battles, especially when it came to dealing with the Primatus or the Atlas creature, the hulking baboon who like went berserker mode towards the end of that, using all in-game mechanics, but there's so many interesting things hidden in there that a lot of people just don't recognize when they see it until it happens. So you thought you were finishing off the boss, and then they tapped into something called Last Resort, and we're still standing and also empowered and shredding up our poor tank, who wasn't a tank at the time.
You were not a tank at the time, but had to redo everything. Yep.
Yes. And then there's this character, Bredo.
I was hiding behind a bush, I think. Sniping from a bush, I think I was. And then Hit was going in and out.
Yeah, because it was an extremely lethal threat and dealing a ridiculous amount of damage until that Last Resort wore off. And, it regained consciousness. And even though it was going through a lot and obviously corrupted by the strangeness going on at the time.
So cool.
I had a slight conversation with the group. And, that turned out to be a sort of emotional thing for me too, because I had to play that character.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember you being like, "Oh my god, I'm dealing so much damage. Oh no."
Yeah.
Oh my goodness gracious.
So that was a very close moment. Also dealing with the big mech in the forest. At the end of that campaign, if you guys took too long to kill it, the forest would have started on fire, and you would have been taking fire damage every round.
Jesus Christ.
Luckily, yeah.
Yeah, that DPS. I remember a lot of DPS really dealing a lot. I just remember a lot of damage in general.
That thing was like a literal tank.
Yeah.
In fact, I overbuilt it, so it was a mega tank. And
yes.
it was taking forever to die.
And we literally hit all the wrong places. Oh my god.
That's okay. It's a learning experience.
Yeah. Oops.
That's the trick with multi-part bosses. And I think something players will probably have to get used to over time is you don't just go in and bash the monster. If it's something like that, you have to figure out what the weak points are and target those first to like see if you can like debilitate it in some way so that it's doing less damage, firing off less stuff. Like I thought that the moment it started targeting people with a rail cannon, you guys are going to disable the rail cannon like immediately.
Oopsie.
So you guys didn't like make that decision until like things started dying, like your allies. And I was like, they get it now. They just kill us.
Yeah, I feel really bad now. Like,
I'm not going to stop shooting.
Very good point. Very good point. So to segue a little bit into our last question, you were talking about like creating the villain in a way that sort of makes sense, where the players have to, strategize a little bit more. So how would you advise DMs and GMs going into this who are just champing at the bit to start? How would you advise them to run your Ibellan Knights system?
That advice literally changes depending on which locale that campaign they're running is taking place in.
Okay.
If they're running it in the Steel Carnival, there's probably going to be a lot of stuff that's based on like arena shenanigans, probably rival gangs and raiders and things like that. Just competition and madness all over the place.
Okay.
If it's a Meridian campaign, you're likely exploring, so you're probably going to be encountering a lot of like beasts and things like that, or strange anomalies in those regions you're exploring. If you're in Hadaran, you're probably dealing with a lot of mafiosos and syndicates and gangs like that. So, and obviously if you're an Olympian, you're dealing with a lot of superhero stuff. So that could go anywhere, really.
Yeah.
It vastly, especially if you're like in a Syrian crevice, pretty much underneath Ibellan. Over there, you're going to be fighting a lot of colossal things because you're underground and there's a lot of weirdness, strangeness, and giant underground terrors and things like that. And sometimes you walk into a cave that is actually a mouth. And you should probably get out of there before it eats you. So,
that's like my nightmare. Oh, I hate that. Those
stalactites look really moist. We should probably leave. It's feeling real warm in here. Why is this cave smell weird? Yeah.
Oh my god. All right. So I mean, Maia, this is amazing. I double mouth action. Ew.
Yep.
No. Why? Oh my gracious. So Maia, this has been absolutely amazing. I really miss playing, and I really wish I could get back to it. Like I can't wait to see what is coming, and I actually really know. So you're on Discord and you're on Twitter. I want to know where I can follow you, because I'm just following you on Patreon and Discord right now. So where are other places that we can all follow you?
The aforementioned Discord. When it comes to Twitter, actually the Discord is found through the Patreon, but at the same time I can start posting links or giving the Leonards on the world like flight.
With the society.
Yes. So when it comes to things like flight, as it is currently, because of the cataclysm that happened in that setting, the atmosphere is extremely turbulent. And it's filled with like rogue elementals and like rocks, like as in the big bird type. A lot of those types of threats. So typically you want to fly low when you're flying. If you try to go too high up, you'll probably be fried by a storm, caught up in a whirlwind, a supercell, or something huge and nasty is going to be pretty much trying to eat you. However, there are other locales, other regions that are trying to find ways to pierce that veil. Coming in the future, I would like to introduce like aliens and space travel and things like that. But I wanted to start here on the planet so people can get used to the planet and, explore that world before they go shooting up into the vastness that is space. Yeah. I think we're trying to again, this is just a continent and it's huge. You want me to do the whole world and then the whole universe? That's years. I'm sorry, but like, I'm just
Yeah.
one person, and given the amount of detail I like to put into things, it's something I think players will have to work their way towards.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, I think Nenners just wants to fly everywhere. Just wants to, get off of the planet. Geopolitics? You weren't just thinking about geopolitics, Nenners. You want to fly a mech out of the planet. I see what you're trying to do. It's not just government seeking to gain advantages. It's not just that. It's Nenners wants to fly everywhere.
One of the other barriers to space travel, at least that isn't being conducted in secret, hint, is most of the world is actually terrified of messing around in space. Because again, the cataclysm that nearly destroyed the planet before was born of people trying to unlock the secrets of FTL travel. Mm-hmm. Minerals that they brought in to test that are from another planet in that same system. And so, yeah, a lot of folks are paranoid about that. And if it is happening, it is in secret. So I'll leave you with that.
Secret stuff. Okay, so guys, I need you to go to the Discord, the Patreon. Are you on Twitter?
I am.
Twitter and where else?
Hold on, I'm old. So it's gonna take me a second to grab all these links.
Hold on, I'm old. Oh,
yeah, give me a minute to be old. I'm gonna do this the easy way, and
I suggest emotes of all of us being old, just particularly me, Nenners, Maia. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Oh, Foos got me.
Foos, yeah, Foos got. Yeah, Foos, you Foos fast. All right.
That's Foos out here foozing.
Yeah, Foos out here foozing.
And this is the Discord.
Also, it's also apparently on the screen. God damn it. I didn't see it the entire time. Cool. It's under Maia's beautiful face. So thank you, Foos, for doing all of that detail as per usual. And for producing Maia Papaya. This has been freaking awesome. I love every time you talk about this, and I can't wait to get more time to try and get back into this because damn, it's just so cool. It's so cool. I'm so excited for it.
Thank you.
Wait.
I appreciate it.
But so we're gonna raid. I don't know how that's gonna happen because Foos is doing all the stuff in the background.
Yeah.
So thank you, Foos.
Cool. First off, thank you, Foos, for producing all this. You are dope.
Right? Like, look at this background. It's very you.
It's okay, Mark. We still love you.
Mark, yo, it's okay. This is gonna be recorded. It is recorded as we speak. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's raiding time.
Yes, it's raiding time. And we're gonna raid in a little bit. So we are raiding to the Dirty Rollers RPG. We thank you everybody for being here. Maia, thank you for being here. Thank you for being you, and thank you for creating all of this because this is amazing. I can't get enough of this, especially because there's so many things in sci-fi that aren't done in the way that you've done it, which has this like supernatural element to it, as well as just such like humanity and down to earth stuff. Like you've run the gauntlet for this, so it's incredible, and I love it.
And I appreciate you for this interview. It was great to get out here and talk about this.
I'm here for you. Here to support you.
All right, muscle times. Let's go.
Muscles. So, and thank you everybody for being here. Again, we're going to be raiding very, very shortly. So also please follow the Dirty Rollers RPG if you aren't already, because they've raided us many times as well. That's correct.
And sci-fi is super fun.
Yes.
But you have to be careful about how you run it, because if you make too much possible immediately, you have a whole mess you can't deal with it.
Exactly. So we're gonna go raiding everybody. Bye. There we go. It's raid time. Yay.